The morning sun streamed through the airport windows as 16-year-old twins Andre and Amara Johnson wheeled their matching carry-on bags toward Gate C-23. This was their first time flying alone, and excitement buzzed between them like electricity. They were headed to Atlanta to visit their grandmother, who had been promising them a summer visit since they were small. "Got the boarding passes?" Amara asked, tucking a braid behind her ear. Andre patted his pocket. "Right here." And I triple-checked our seat numbers. He pulled out the boarding passes and looked at them again. "Seats 14A and 14B. We even get to sit by the window like you wanted." The twins had saved their allowance for months to upgrade their seats. Both honor roll students with perfect attendance records, they had convinced their parents they were responsible enough for this trip. They had researched everything about flying etiquette, from security procedures to boarding protocols. "I can't believe Mom and Dad finally let us do this," Amara said, adjusting her backpack. "Remember how many presentations we had to make?" Andre laughed. That PowerPoint about airline safety statistics was worth it, though. They arrived at the gate just as boarding was beginning for their flight to Atlanta. The twins waited patiently for their boarding group to be called, standing back from the gate as the first-class passengers and those needing special assistance went through. "Group B, now boarding," came the announcement over the speaker. "That's us," Andre said, straightening his collar. Their mother had insisted they dress nicely for the flight. Andre in a button-down shirt and Amara in a neat blouse and jeans. The line moved quickly, and soon they were walking down the jetway, boarding, passes and ID cards ready. The flight attendant at the door greeted most passengers with a smile, but when the twins approached, her expression changed subtly. "Boarding passes," she said curtly, extending her hand. The name tag on her uniform read, "Ms. Winters." Andre handed over both passes with a polite smile. "Good morning." Ms. Winters examined their passes longer than she had for the passengers ahead of them. Her eyes darted between the passes and the twins' faces. "These seats are in the premium economy section," she said, her tone suggesting disbelief. "Yes, ma'am," Amara replied. "We upgraded them." Ms. Winters handed back the passes without a word and gestured them forward with a stiff movement of her hand. The twins exchanged a quick glance but continued down the aisle, counting rows until they found their seats, 14A and 14B, Andre confirmed, placing their carry-ons in the overhead compartment exactly as the airline's website had instructed. Wheels first, handles accessible. They settled into their seats, and Amara pulled out the safety card from the seat pocket. "Look, they have newer planes on this route. The safety card shows the newer oxygen mask design." Andre smiled at his sister's thoroughness. "You could probably teach the safety demonstration at this point." As other passengers filled the plane, the twins noticed Ms. Winters watching them from the front of the cabin. Twice she walked past their row, looking at their seat numbers and then at them. "Did we do something wrong?" Amara whispered. "I don't think so," Andre replied. "We followed all the rules." A middle-aged couple took the aisle seat next to them and smiled warmly. "First time flying?" the woman asked. "First time flying alone," Andre answered. "Our grandmother is waiting for us in Atlanta." "How wonderful," the woman said. "I remember my first solo flight. I was nervous the whole time." Their conversation was interrupted when Ms. Winters appeared beside their row again. "I need to verify." "You're in the correct seats," she said, looking directly at the twins while ignoring the couple beside them. Andre produced their boarding passes again. 14A and 14B, ma'am." Ms. Winters studied the passes with narrowed eyes. "These were upgraded from your original booking?" "Yes," Amara explained. "We saved up for the upgrade. Our parents helped us complete the transaction online last week." Ms. Winters handed the passes back without a word and continued down the aisle, but her eyes kept returning to their row every few minutes. "Don't worry about it," the woman next to them said quietly. "Some people just like to feel important. You two are doing fine." As the final passengers boarded, an elderly man with a cane struggled down the aisle. He stopped near their row, trying to lift his small suitcase into the overhead bin. "Let me help you, sir," Andre said, unbuckling his seatbelt and standing up. "Oh, thank you, young man," the elderly gentleman replied with relief. These old arms aren't what they used to be. Andre carefully lifted the suitcase and placed it in the bin, making sure it was secure. The elderly man patted his shoulder gratefully. Such good manners. Your parents must be proud. Before Andre could respond, Ms. Winters was suddenly there, her voice sharp enough to turn heads throughout the cabin. What are you doing out of your seat? Boarding is still in progress. You need to remain seated with your seatbelt fastened. Andre blinked in surprise. I was just helping this gentleman with his bag, ma'am. Return to your seat immediately, Ms. Winters ordered, her voice unnecessarily loud. Several nearby passengers looked up from their phones and magazines. The young man was only helping me, the elderly gentleman explained. Ms. Winters ignored him. If you can't follow simple instructions, we're going to have a problem, she said to Andre. Amara watched her brother's face fall as he quietly sat down and refastened his seatbelt. His ears burned with embarrassment as Ms. Winters continued to stand over them, watching. Is there something else we can help you with? The woman seated next to them finally asked Ms. Winters. Just making sure everyone follows the rules, Ms. Winters replied before walking away. Amara reached for her brother's hand and squeezed it gently. It's okay, she whispered. You didn't do anything wrong. The airplane filled with the usual sounds of final preparations, the click of seatbelts, the rustle of magazines, the soft conversations of passengers settling in. The twins sat quietly, suddenly aware of every movement they made. The easy excitement they had felt earlier had dimmed considerably. I think she doesn't believe we belong in these seats, Andre whispered to his sister. That's silly. We have the boarding passes. We paid for the upgrade. The flight attendants began their final cabin check. Another attendant, a younger woman, with a kind smile stopped at their row. First time flying? She asked, noticing their careful attention to the seatbelt demonstration being performed at the front. First time alone, Amara replied quietly. You're doing great, the attendant assured them. Let me know if you need anything during the flight. Her warmth provided a welcome contrast to Ms. Winters, who was now at the front of the cabin, staring down the aisle. Her gaze stopped at their row, her lips pursed into a thin line. Doesn't she have other things to do? Andre whispered. Just ignore her, Amara advised. Remember what Mom says. Kill them with kindness. The plane began to push, back from the gate, and the usual announcements played over the speakers. The twins followed along with the safety demonstration, even though they had practically memorized it from their research. At least Grandma will be waiting for us when we land, Andre said, trying to recapture their earlier excitement. She promised to make her famous peach cobbler and take us to the aquarium, Amara added. I can't wait to see the whale sharks. The plane taxied toward the runway, joining the line of aircraft waiting for takeoff. The twins watched through the window, pointing out different plane models to each other. For a moment, they forgot about Ms. Winters and her strange behavior. But their reprieve was short-lived. As the plane waited its turn for takeoff, Ms. Winters appeared in their row again. Is everything in your bags your own property? She asked abruptly. The twins looked at her in confusion. Yes, ma'am, they answered in unison. No one gave you anything to carry for them? No, Andre replied, bewildered. Just our clothes and some books. The couple next to them exchanged concerned glances. The woman leaned forward slightly. Is there a problem? She asked Ms. Winters. Just routine questions, Ms. Winters replied without looking at her. She lingered a moment longer, then moved away. That was weird, Amara whispered. Why would she think someone gave us something? Andre shrugged, but his earlier joy had completely evaporated. What should have been an exciting adventure now felt tense and uncomfortable. He took out his phone and sent a quick text to their parents before the plane took off. Made it on board. Some issues with flight attendant. Will call when we land. He didn't want to worry them, but he also felt he should document what was happening, just in case. The plane finally moved into position for takeoff, engines increasing in volume as they prepared to hurtle down the runway. Despite the uncomfortable situation with Ms. Winters, Amara couldn't help but feel a thrill as the plane gathered speed and lifted into the air. "We're flying," she whispered, grabbing her brother's hand. Andre smiled, trying to recapture the magic of the moment. Next stop, Atlanta. But as the plane climbed into the clouds, neither of them could shake the feeling that Ms. Winters wasn't done with them. Her behavior had cast a shadow over what should have been a perfect day. Unknown to the twins, several passengers had noticed the strange interactions. The elderly man Andre had helped was now talking quietly with his seatmate, gesturing toward the twins and shaking his head. The couple next to them kept glancing toward the front of the plane, where Ms. Winters stood, whispering to another flight attendant and looking back at row 14. What should have been the start of a wonderful adventure was quickly turning into something else entirely. And the twins had no idea that soon, one phone call would change the course of their journey in ways they could never have imagined. The seatbelt sign dinged off 20 minutes into the flight. Passengers began to shift in their seats, some reaching for books or tablets, others reclining slightly to get comfortable for the journey ahead. Andre and Amara remained perfectly still, afraid that any movement might attract unwanted attention from Ms. Winters. "Do you think it's okay if I get my book out?" Amara whispered to her brother. Andre glanced toward the front of the cabin where Ms. Winters was organizing the beverage cart with another flight attendant. "I think so. Just move, slowly." Amara carefully reached under the seat in front of her and pulled out her backpack. She unzipped it as quietly as possible and removed her dog-eared copy of a fantasy novel. As she was zipping the bag closed, Ms. Winters appeared beside their row once again, as if summoned by the sound. "What are you taking out of that bag?" she demanded, loud enough for nearby passengers to turn and look. Amara held up her book. "Just this, ma'am." Ms. Winters' eyes narrowed. "Make sure everything else stays in your bag. The aisle needs to remain clear." "Yes, ma'am," Amara replied softly, tucking the backpack firmly under the seat in front of her. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her book, but the words swam before her eyes. She couldn't focus. The kind flight attendant they had met earlier began making her way down the aisle from the back of the plane, asking passengers about their drink preferences. Her name tag read, Ms. Chen. Her approach brought some relief to the twins, who hoped she might serve their section instead of Ms. Winters. "This isn't right," the woman seated next to the twins muttered to her husband. "Those kids haven't done anything wrong." Her husband nodded. "I've been watching. That flight attendant is singling them out." The woman seemed to make a decision. She pressed the call button above her seat. Ms. Chen noticed the light and approached their row. "How can I help you?" she asked with a genuine smile. "I was wondering if we could speak to the lead flight attendant," the woman said quietly. "We're concerned about how these young people are being treated." Ms. Chen's smile faltered slightly. She glanced at the twins, then back to the woman. "I'll see what I can do," she said, before continuing down the aisle with her cart. Andre and Amara exchanged worried looks. They didn't want to cause trouble, but they were grateful someone had noticed what was happening. "Maybe we should just try to sleep through the flight," Andre suggested. "I don't think I can sleep," Amara replied. "I feel like I'm being watched every second." A few minutes later, Ms. Winters approached with the beverage cart. She served the couple next to the twins first. "What would you like to drink?" she asked, her voice suddenly professional and pleasant. "I'll have a ginger ale," the woman replied, her tone cool. "Same for me," her husband added. Ms. Winters poured their drinks and handed them over with napkins. Then she looked at the twins, her smile disappearing. "What about you two?" she asked, the warmth gone from her voice. "May I have an apple juice, please?" Amara asked politely. "Orange juice, please," Andre added. Ms. Winters poured their drinks but practically dropped the cups onto their tray tables, causing some juice to slosh over the sides. She didn't offer them napkins. "Thank you," Andre said anyway, remembering his parents' lessons about always being polite. Ms. Winters didn't respond and pushed the cart forward to the next row. The woman next to them passed over 2 of her own napkins. "Here you go," she said kindly. "Thank you," Amara replied, using the napkins to wipe up the spilled juice. I'm Patricia, by the way, and this is my husband Robert, the woman said. We're heading to Atlanta to see our son and his family. Nice to meet you, Andre said. I'm Andre, and this is my sister Amara. We're visiting our grandmother. First time flying alone, you said? Robert asked. Andre nodded. Our parents were nervous, but we convinced them we could handle it. Well, you're handling it better than many adults would, Patricia said, glancing meaningfully toward the front of the plane where Ms. Winters stood. The flight hit a patch of turbulence, causing the plane to bounce slightly. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and Ms. Chen's voice came over the intercom asking all passengers to return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts. A teenage boy across the aisle from the twins ignored the announcement and continued standing, rummaging through his bag in the overhead compartment. Ms. Winters walked by him without saying a word. Did you see that? Robert whispered to his wife. She didn't say a thing to him. Patricia nodded grimly. I'm keeping track of all of this. The turbulence subsided after a few minutes, and the seatbelt sign turned off again. Andre needed to use the restroom but was hesitant to get up. I'll come with you, Amara offered, sensing his discomfort. The twins carefully made their way to the back of the plane, trying not to touch any of the seats as they passed. The restrooms were both occupied, so they stood quietly in the galley area, waiting their turn. Ms. Chen was there, preparing a special meal for a passenger with dietary restrictions. She smiled at them. Everything okay with your flight so far? She asked. The twins exchanged a look. It's fine, Andre said diplomatically. Ms. Chen's expression suggested she understood more than they were saying. First flights can be intimidating, but you two seem very mature for your age. How old are you? 16, Amara answered. We're twins. I have twins too, but they're much younger. Just 7, Ms. Chen shared. They'd be very impressed to hear about you flying by yourselves. For the first time since boarding, the twins relaxed a little. Ms. Chen's friendly conversation felt normal, a stark contrast to Ms. Winters' hostility. One of the restroom doors opened and Andre stepped forward. You can go first, he told his sister. Amara shook her head. You were waiting first. Before Andre could enter the restroom, Ms. Winters appeared at the end of the galley. What are you two doing back here? She demanded. Waiting for the restroom, Andre explained, pointing to the now open door. Both of you? Ms. Winters asked skeptically. I'm waiting my turn, Amara explained. Ms. Winters looked at Ms. Chen. They shouldn't both be standing back here. It's a security concern. Ms. Chen's smile became fixed. They're just waiting for the restroom, Karen. It's not a problem. I think it is, Ms. Winters insisted. One should return to their seat while the other uses the facility. That's not a rule, Ms. Chen said quietly but firmly. They're not blocking the galley. Andre quickly stepped into the restroom, hoping to defuse the situation. Through the door, he could hear Ms. Winters continuing to argue with Ms. Chen. These two have been causing issues since they boarded, Ms. Winters was saying. They've been moving around, opening bags, disrupting other passengers. I haven't observed any of that, Ms. Chen replied, her voice remaining professional but cool. Andre finished as quickly as possible and exited the restroom. Your turn, he told his sister, avoiding eye contact with Ms. Winters. Amara slipped into the restroom, and Andre stood awkwardly, unsure whether he should return to his seat alone as Ms. Winters had suggested. You can wait for your sister, Ms. Chen assured him. It's perfectly fine. Ms. Winters pursed her lips but was called away by another passenger's call button. As soon as she was gone, Ms. Chen turned to Andre. Has she been treating you like this the whole flight? She asked quietly. Andre hesitated, then nodded. Since before we even took off. Ms. Chen's expression was troubled. I'm sorry about that. Some people... She trailed off, then seemed to make a decision. When you get back to your seats, if anything else happens, use your call button. Ask for me specifically, Lily Chen. Thank you, Andre said gratefully. Amara emerged from the restroom and the twins made their way back to their seats. They found Patricia and Robert engaged in a quiet but intense conversation that stopped when they noticed the twins returning. "Everything okay?" Patricia asked. "Yes, thank you," Amara replied, though her tight smile suggested otherwise. The twins had just settled back into their seats when they heard a commotion several rows ahead. A young white boy, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, was running up and down the aisle while his mother tried to coax him back to his seat. Ms. Winters approached the situation, her voice gentle. "He's just got a little energy to burn off, hasn't he?" she said to the mother with an understanding smile. "Flying can be boring for little ones." "I'm trying to get him to sit down," the mother said apologetically. "No rush," Ms. Winters assured her. "The seatbelt sign is off, just keep him from bothering other passengers." The boy ran past their row, accidentally bumping Andre's shoulder. "Sorry," he called out without stopping. "It's fine," Andre replied with a smile. He remembered being that age and full of energy. Ms. Winters, who had followed the boy down the aisle, stopped at their row. Her smile vanished. "You need to keep your arms and legs out of the aisle," she said sternly to Andre. "You're creating a hazard." Andre blinked in confusion. I was just sitting here." "I saw you extend your arm into the aisle," Ms. Winters insisted. "That's why the child tripped." "He didn't trip," Patricia interjected. "And Andre didn't extend his arm. The boy bumped into him as he ran by." Ms. Winters ignored her. "This is your FINA. Call warning," she said to the twins. "If there are any more disruptions, I'll have to report this to the captain." She walked away, leaving stunned silence in her wake. "That's it," Robert said, unfolding his tall frame from his seat. "I'm going to speak to the lead flight attendant." "Be careful," his wife cautioned. "We don't want to make things worse for these kids." Robert nodded and made his way to the front of the plane. The twins watched nervously as he spoke to another flight attendant, who then went to fetch someone from business class. A moment later, an older man with silver hair and a senior flight attendant pin on his uniform appeared. Robert gestured toward their row as he spoke. Andre and Amara sat perfectly still, their earlier excitement about the trip completely gone. They had never experienced anything like this before. Their parents had prepared them for so many things, about flying alone, how to handle delays, what to do if they missed a connection, how to keep their belongings secure. But not this. Not someone in authority treating them like criminals for simply existing. "I want to go home," Amara whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Andre reached for his sister's hand. "It's going to be okay. We've got people looking out for us now." Robert returned to his seat, his expression grim. "The lead attendant said he'll keep an eye on the situation," he reported quietly. "Apparently Ms. Winters has had incidents before." "That doesn't surprise me," Patricia replied. She turned to the twins. "Try not to worry. We're not going to let anything happen to you." Amara wiped away a tear. "Thank you." The next hour passed without incident. The twins kept to themselves, barely moving, speaking in whispers when they needed to communicate. Ms. Winters stayed at the front of the plane, though they could feel her watching them. The captain announced they were beginning their descent into Atlanta. Flight attendants moved through the cabin, collecting trash and ensuring tray tables were up and seats were in their upright positions. Ms. Chen approached their row, her manner efficient but kind. "Almost there," she said cheerfully as she checked their seat belts. She leaned a little closer and added in a lower voice, "You've handled this beautifully. Your grandmother will be proud." Her words gave them strength. They were almost through this ordeal. Soon they would be with their grandmother, eating peach cobbler and laughing about their adventure. The plane began its final approach, the familiar sensation of descent pressing them into their seats. Amara reached for her brother's hand again, and they exchanged a small smile. They had survived their first solo flight, despite the unexpected challenges. As the wheels touched down on the runway, a round of applause broke out among some passengers. A tradition that had mostly faded in recent years but still occasionally happened. The twins joined in, feeling a sense of relief wash over them. The plane taxied to the gate and the seatbelt sign dinged off for the final time. Passengers began the usual routine of gathering belongings and forming a line in the aisle. "No rush," Patricia told the twins. "Let some of this crowd clear out first." They nodded gratefully, content to wait. Through the window, they could see the airport terminal, knowing their grandmother was waiting just inside. Ms. Winter's voice came over the intercom, thanking passengers for flying with them today and hoping to see them again soon. The irony of her words wasn't lost on the twins. As the crowd in the aisle thinned, Andre and Amara stood to retrieve their bags from the overhead compartment. Just as Andre was lifting Amara's bag down, Ms. Winters appeared beside them. "I need you two to remain on the plane after other passengers have deplaned," she said, her voice cold. "Security needs to speak with you." The twins froze, looking at each other in alarm. "What?" Patricia stood up, her voice sharp with disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "This doesn't concern you, ma'am," Ms. Winters replied. "Please continue." "To the exit." "Like hell it doesn't," Robert said, standing as well. "These children have done absolutely nothing wrong." "Sir, I need you to deplane now," Ms. Winters insisted. "Security will handle this matter." Andre felt his heart pounding. "We didn't do anything," he said, his voice small but determined. "We just want to see our grandmother." Ms. Winters ignored him, turning to speak to someone at the front of the plane. The twins could see she was on a phone, gesturing toward them as she spoke. "Don't worry," Patricia assured them. "We're not leaving you." The final passengers filed past, some glancing curiously at the developing scene. Soon, only the twins, Patricia, Robert, and a few scattered passengers who seemed to be deliberately taking their time remained. Ms. Chen appeared, her expression serious. "What's going on here, Karen?" Before Ms. Winters could answer, heavy footsteps sounded from the jetway. 2 airport security officers appeared at the entrance to the plane. The situation had just escalated far beyond anything the twins could have imagined. What should have been a simple flight to visit their grandmother had somehow turned into a security incident, and they still had no idea why. The 2 security officers stepped into the cabin, their expressions serious as they surveyed the scene. One was tall with a clean-shaven head and the other was shorter with salt and pepper hair. Both wore the navy blue uniforms of airport security. "What seems to be the problem here?" the taller officer asked, looking between Ms. Winters and the small group still remaining on the plane. Ms. Winters straightened her uniform and stepped forward. "These 2 teenagers," she said, pointing at Andre and Amara, "have been disruptive throughout the flight. They've ignored instructions, moved around the cabin unnecessarily, and made other passengers uncomfortable." Andre felt his mouth fall open in shock. Beside him, Amara's hand trembled in his grip. "That's completely false," Robert said firmly, stepping forward. "My wife and I have been sitting next to these young people the entire flight, and they've been nothing but respectful and well-behaved." The shorter officer pulled out a small notepad. "Sir, could I get your name, please?" "Robert Thompson," he replied. "And this is my wife, Patricia. We're happy to provide statements about what we've observed." The taller officer turned to Ms. Winters. "Can you be more specific about the disruptive behavior?" Ms. Winters nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "They were out of their seats during boarding, rummaging through bags after being told not to, congregating in the back galley area and extending limbs into the aisle, creating a hazard for other passengers." "None of that is true," Patricia interjected. "In fact, these children have been singled out and harassed by this flight attendant from the moment they boarded." By now, Ms. Chen had moved closer to the group, her professional demeanor intact, but her eyes flashing with concern. "Officers, if I may," she said. "I've also observed these passengers throughout the flight, and I saw no disruptive behavior whatsoever." The twins stood frozen, uncertain what to do or say. They had never been in trouble with any kind of authority before. Their parents had always taught them to be respectful and follow rules. This situation was completely foreign to them. "Could I see some identification?" the shorter officer asked the twins. Andre carefully reached into his pocket and pulled out his student ID. Amara did the same. They handed them over with trembling hands. "These are just school IDs," the officer noted. Do you have government-issued identification? A passport, perhaps? We have copies of their birth certificates and a notarized letter from their parents, Patricia said, reaching into her purse. They showed them to me earlier when we were chatting. The twins looked at her in surprise. They hadn't shown her any documents. Patricia gave them a quick wink as she pretended to search through her bag. I think we need to contact their grandmother right away. She's waiting for them in the terminal and must be worried sick by now. The taller officer rubbed his forehead, clearly trying to sort through the conflicting accounts. Let's all take a step back here, he said. Ms. Winters, you made a call reporting disruptive passengers, correct? Yes, that's right. Ms. Winters, confirmed. As is protocol when passenger behavior threatens the safety of the flight. At what point did their behavior threaten flight safety? Ms. Chen asked, her voice controlled but edged with disbelief. Before Ms. Winters could answer, a new voice entered the conversation. What's going on here? Why has the plane been grounded? Everyone turned to see a man in a pilot's uniform standing at the entrance to the cockpit. The captain's stripes on his shoulder indicated his rank. Captain Reynolds, Ms. Winters said. I was just explaining to security about the disruptive passengers. The captain looked at the twins, then at the remaining passengers and crew. I received a call that we had a security situation requiring the aircraft to remain at the gate. Is this it? He gestured toward Andre and Amara, who were still standing perfectly still, their school IDs now returned to their hands. Yes, sir, Ms. Winters replied. These two have been causing problems since boarding. Captain Reynolds frowned. Define problems, he said, his tone suggesting he wasn't seeing anything that warranted grounding his aircraft. As Ms. Winters began to repeat her claims, another flight attendant approached the group. This one was older, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her name tag identified her as Ms. Washington, and she wore the same rank insignia as Ms. Winters. Captain, if I may, she said. I've been reviewing the situation with several passengers who approached me in BU. Sinus class. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. An elderly man appeared behind her, the same gentleman Andre had helped with his luggage. There certainly has, he said firmly. This young man here, he pointed to Andre, helped me with my bag during boarding when no one else offered assistance. He was nothing but polite and respectful. The captain looked increasingly confused. So what exactly is the security concern that required us to remain at the gate? We're already running behind schedule. One of the security officers stepped forward. Sir, we were called to respond to a report of disruptive passengers. We're still trying to get clarity on the situation. I can provide some clarity, came another new voice. A woman in her mid-30s with curly hair and glasses stepped forward from the back of the plane. I'm Dr. Eleanor Wright, professor of sociology at Emory University. I've been observing the situation unfold since boarding, and what I've witnessed is deeply troubling. She held up her phone. I've recorded several interactions between Ms. Winters and these young people. I believe they clearly show a pattern of discriminatory treatment. Ms. Winters' face paled. You can't record on an aircraft, that's against regulations. Actually, Dr. Wright replied calmly, FAA regulations prohibit cell phone calls during flight, not video recording. Many airlines have their own policies about filming, but they primarily concern filming crew members without consent for harassment purposes. I recorded these interactions because I was concerned about the well-being of these minors traveling alone. Captain Reynolds sighed deeply. Let's move this discussion off the aircraft. Ms. Washington, please escort the remaining passengers to the terminal. Ms. Winters, I'd like you to come with me to speak with the chief purser. But Captain, Ms. Winters protested, these passengers will be escorted to the terminal like everyone else. The captain finished firmly. He turned to the twins. I apologize for any confusion. You're free to deplane and meet your waiting party. Relief washed over the twins, but it was short-lived. I'm afraid I can't allow that yet, sir, the taller security officer said. Since a formal complaint was filed, we need to complete our investigation. The captain's jaw tightened. These are minors. Their guardian is waiting in the terminal. Surely we can resolve this without detaining them. I have a suggestion, Doctor. Wright interjected. Why don't we all move to a private area in the terminal? The young people's grandmother can join us and we can sort this out properly. The security officers exchanged glances, then nodded. That sounds reasonable, the shorter one agreed. We'll escort everyone to the security office. As they filed off the plane, Andre and Amara finally found their voices. Are we in trouble? Amara asked Dr. Wright, who had fallen into step beside them. No, sweetheart, she replied quietly. What's happening here is wrong, and there are plenty of witnesses who know it. Your grandmother will be with you soon, and we'll get this straightened out. The small procession made its way through the jetway and into the terminal. Several passengers from their flight had lingered nearby, watching with concerned expressions. As they emerged, an elderly woman rushed forward. Andre! Amara! She called out, her face etched with worry. What's happening? I've been waiting and waiting. Grandma! The twins cried in unison, rushing toward her. The security officers stepped forward to intercept them, but Captain Reynolds held up a hand. Let them greet their grandmother, he said firmly. They're not going anywhere. The reunion was brief but emotional. The twins' grandmother hugged them tightly, then turned to face the group with fire in her eyes. Would someone like to explain why my grandchildren are being escorted by security when they've done nothing wrong? Ma'am, I'm Officer Jenkins, the taller security officer said. There's been a complaint about your grandchildren's behavior on the flight. We're required to investigate. What kind of complaint? She demanded. As Officer Jenkins began to explain, Dr. Wright approached the grandmother. Excuse me, she said quietly. I have video evidence that might be helpful. I'm Dr. Eleanor Wright. The grandmother's expression softened slightly. Dorothy Johnson, she replied. Thank you for looking out for my grandchildren. The group moved to a private security office just off the main terminal. It was a small room with a conference table and several chairs. The twins sat close to their grandmother, drawing comfort from her presence. Now, Officer Jenkins said once everyone was seated, let's get to the bottom of this. Ms. Winters sat stiffly in her chair, her earlier confidence beginning to waver as she glanced around at the assembled witnesses. Captain Reynolds had been called away to prepare for the plane's delayed departure but had promised to check in later. I'd like to see the video Dr. Wright mentioned, said the shorter officer, whose name badge read Officer Martinez. Dr. Wright nodded and pulled out her phone. I have 3 separate recordings, she explained. The first is from boarding when Ms. Winters questioned the twins about their seating assignment. She played the video, which clearly showed Ms. Winters scrutinizing their boarding passes far longer than other passengers and making comments about their premium economy seats. The second video shows Ms. Winters reprimanding Andre for helping an elderly passenger with luggage. Dr. Wright continued, playing the next clip. As you can see, other passengers were still moving about the cabin, including this man here. She pointed to another passenger who could be seen standing in the aisle, who received no such warning. Ms. Winters shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Those passengers weren't causing disruptions, she said defensively. And neither were my grandchildren, Dorothy responded firmly. Dr. Wright played the third video, showing the incident with the young boy running in the aisle, and Ms. Winters contrasting responses to his behavior versus her accusation against Andre. The security officers watched the videos carefully, their expressions becoming increasingly troubled. I'd like to make a statement as well, Patricia Thompson said. My husband and I sat next to these young people throughout the flight. They were polite, quiet, and followed all instructions. Ms. Winters' treatment of them was unprofessional and appeared to be targeted harassment. Robert nodded in agreement. We've flown hundreds of times and I've never witnessed anything like this. Ms. Chen, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. As a fellow flight attendant, I found Ms. Winters' actions concerning. These young passengers did nothing to warrant such treatment. Ms. Washington, the senior flight attendant, cleared her throat. I've received similar reports from other passengers in business class who observed these interactions. Officer Martinez turned to Ms. Winters. Do you have any specific, concrete examples of disruptive behavior that aren't addressed by the witnesses or video evidence? Ms. Winters' face had grown increasingly flushed. They were congregating in the back galley, she insisted. That's a security concern. They were waiting for the restroom, Ms. Chen corrected. One at a time, as is perfectly normal and allowed. Officer Jenkins studied his notes, then looked at the twins. Have you two ever flown before? He asked, his tone considerably gentler than when they'd first met. With our parents, yes, Andre answered, but this is our first time flying alone. They prepared for weeks, their grandmother added proudly, researched everything about flying etiquette, packed according to regulations, even memorized the safety procedures. Officer Martinez exchanged a look with his colleague, then stood up. Ms. Winters, could we speak with you outside for a moment? Ms. Winters followed the officers out of the room, leaving an awkward silence behind. Dr. Wright turned to the twins with a kind smile. You've handled this with remarkable composure, she said. Many adults wouldn't have managed nearly as well. We didn't want to cause trouble, Amara said softly. We just wanted to visit our grandma. Dorothy put her arms around her grandchildren. You didn't cause any trouble, sweetheart. Sometimes people bring their own troubles with them and put them on others who don't deserve it. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Officer Jenkins entered alone. After reviewing all the evidence and witness statements, he said, We've determined there was no security violation or disruptive behavior from these young passengers. He turned to the twins and their grandmother. You're all free to go. We apologize for the inconvenience. Relief washed over everyone in the room. The twins' shoulders sagged as the tension they'd been holding finally released. What about Ms. Winters? Patricia asked. This kind of behavior shouldn't go unaddressed. Officer Jenkins nodded. The airline has its own procedures for handling employee conduct issues. I can assure you this incident will be fully documented and reported to the appropriate authorities. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Wright approached Dorothy. If you'd like a copy of these videos for any reason, I'm happy to provide them, she said, handing over a business card. Dorothy took it gratefully. Thank you for everything. The Thompsons also exchanged contact information with the family, promising to follow up and check on the twins. You made quite an impression on a lot of people today, Robert told the twins. Not many would have handled that situation with such dignity. As they finally exited the security office, Andre and Amara felt the weight of the ordeal lifting from their shoulders. Their grandmother walked between them, an arm around each. Well, she said with a wry smile, this wasn't quite the welcome I had planned. How about we get your bags and head home for some peach cobbler? The twins nodded eagerly, but there was one more surprise waiting for them. As they walked through the terminal, they noticed Ms. Chen hurrying toward them. I'm so glad I caught you, she said, slightly out of breath. I wanted to give you these. She handed them 2 envelope-sized packages. They're wings, the pins we give to first-time flyers. Usually they're for much younger children, but I think you two have earned them today. The twins accepted the small gifts with genuine smiles, their first since the ordeal began. Thank you, Andre said, for everything you did back there. Ms. Chen shook her head. I only wish I'd done more sooner, but I want you to know that what happened today, that's not what flying should be like. I hope you'll give it another chance someday. Maybe, Amara said, though she didn't sound convinced. As Ms. Chen turned to leave, she paused. Oh, and just so you know, Ms. Winters won't be on your return flight. I made sure of that. With those reassuring words, she disappeared back into the crowd of travelers. Dorothy looked down at her grandchildren, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and sadness. Let's go home, she said softly. I think we all need some rest after that adventure. The twins nodded, still processing everything that had happened. What should have been a simple 2-hour flight had turned into something much more complicated and distressing. But as they walked toward the baggage claim surrounded by people who had stood up for them, they also felt something unexpected, a sense of resilience and the knowledge that sometimes, when faced with injustice, strangers could become allies. The plane that had brought them to Atlanta was now preparing for its next journey. Unknown to the twins, their own journey had just begun. one that would eventually lead to changes that would impact many future travelers. But for now, they were simply looking forward to their grandmother's famous peach cobbler and the comfort of knowing the worst of their trip was behind them, or so they thought. Dorothy's home was exactly as the twins remembered it, warm, filled with the scent of peach cobbler, and decorated with family photos covering nearly every available surface. After the stress of the flight, it felt like a sanctuary. Andre and Amara sat at the kitchen table while their grandmother bustled around, serving up generous portions of her famous dessert. "Now," Dorothy said, sitting down across from them with a determined expression, "I want you to tell me everything that happened on that plane. Don't leave anything out." The twins exchanged glances. They'd given her a brief overview at the airport, but had been too shaken to go into details. "It started during boarding," Andre began, his spoon hovering over his cobbler. "The flight attendant, Ms. Winters, kept watching us and checking our boarding passes. She seemed surprised that we were in premium economy seats. Like we didn't belong there," Amara added quietly. Dorothy's expression darkened, but she gestured for them to continue. Over the next half hour, the twins took turns describing every interaction with Ms. Winters, from the scolding Andre received for helping the elderly passenger to the accusation about extending limbs into the aisle. "And then when we landed, she tried to have security detain us," Andre finished. "If those other passengers hadn't stayed behind to help us, I don't know what would have happened." Dorothy had remained silent throughout their story, but her eyes had grown increasingly fiery. Now she reached across the table and took each of their hands in hers. "I am so proud of how you handled yourselves," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "But what happened to you was wrong, deeply wrong, and it shouldn't be allowed to just fade away." "What do you mean, Grandma?" Amara asked. Dorothy stood up and walked to a small desk in the corner of the kitchen. She returned with a notepad and pen. "I want you to write down the names of everyone who helped you today. That professor with the videos, the couple who sat next to you, the kind flight attendant, everyone. We're going to thank them properly, and then we're going to make sure this doesn't happen to other children." "How?" Andre asked. "First, we're calling your parents," Dorothy said, picking up her phone. "Then we're going to write to the airline, and depending on their response, we might need to take further steps." The twins nodded solemnly. They hadn't been raised to make a fuss or draw attention to themselves, but they also knew their grandmother was right. What had happened wasn't fair, and letting it go unchallenged might mean it would happen to someone else. The call with their parents was emotional and long. Michelle and David Johnson had been worried when they received Andre's text before takeoff, but had assumed any issues had been resolved when they didn't hear anything more. Learning what their children had endured filled them with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. "We're coming there," Michelle declared. "We'll book flights for tomorrow morning." "Mom, you don't have to do that," Amara protested. "We're okay now." "We're coming," David confirmed, his voice leaving no room for argument. "This isn't something to handle over the phone." After the call ended, Dorothy looked at her grandchildren with gentle eyes. "Your parents need to be here," she explained. "Not just for you, but for themselves. It's hard to be far away when your children are hurting." That night, the twins slept in the same guest room, despite there being a second bedroom available. Neither wanted to be alone with their thoughts. As they lay in the darkness, Amara whispered, "Do you think anything will really change because of what happened to us?" Andre was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "But I think we have to try, right? Otherwise, what was the point of going through all that?" The next morning, a package arrived for Dorothy. Inside were printed copies of Dr. Wright's videos, along with a thumb drive containing the original, files and a heartfelt note expressing her continued support. "She works fast," Dorothy remarked with approval. "Now we have evidence that can't be disputed." By the time Michelle and David arrived that afternoon, Dorothy had drafted a detailed letter to the airline's customer service department. The twins' parents read it silently, their expressions growing increasingly grim. "It's a good start," David said when he finished reading. But I think we need to aim higher than customer service. This needs to reach the executive level. Michelle, who worked in corporate communications, nodded in agreement. And we should consider reaching out to that sociology professor again. Her expertise could be valuable, especially since she witnessed everything firsthand. I already called her, Dorothy said with a small smile. She's coming for dinner tomorrow, said she'd be happy to help in any way she can. The family spent the rest of the day trying to give the twins some semblance of a normal visit. Playing board games, looking through old photo albums, and preparing a big family dinner together. But the shadow of what had happened lingered, especially when Andre flinched at the sound of the doorbell, and when Amara fell uncharacteristically quiet during dinner. Later that evening, after the twins had gone to bed, the adults gathered in the living room to discuss next steps. I've been doing some research, David said, opening his laptop. There have been other incidents like this. Not identical, but similar patterns of discriminatory treatment by airline staff. Some have resulted in policy changes, others in legal actions. I don't want to put the kids through a lawsuit, Michelle said worriedly. They've been through enough already. Not necessarily a lawsuit, David clarified. But we need to approach this systematically. Document everything, gather witness statements, present a clear case to the airline that this wasn't just a misunderstanding or a one-off incident with a single employee. Dorothy nodded. That professor, Dr. Wright, she mentioned something about patterns of behavior. I think she could help us frame this properly. I'm still struggling to understand how this happened, Michelle said, her voice breaking slightly. They're 16. They've never been in trouble. They did everything right. Researched the rules, saved for their upgrade, followed all instructions. And still, David put his arm around his wife. That's exactly why we need to address this. Because they did everything right, and it still wasn't enough. Dr. Eleanor Wright arrived the following evening carrying a stack of folders and a determined expression. After introductions and a brief dinner, the adults gathered around Dorothy's dining table while the twins watched a movie in the living room, close enough to be called if needed, but given some space from the heavy conversation. First, Dr. Wright began. I want to say how impressed I was with your children. Their composure under such blatant discrimination was remarkable. Michelle and David exchanged pained glances at the word discrimination, though neither disputed it. I've taken the liberty of organizing some information that might be helpful, Dr. Wright continued, opening one of her folders. I've been studying incidents like this for years. It's part of my research on systemic bias in transportation systems. Unfortunately, what happened to your children follows a distressingly familiar pattern. She laid out several news articles and academic papers, each describing similar incidents across various airlines. The common thread, she explained, is that people of color, particularly black passengers, are often subjected to higher scrutiny. We're not looking for compensation or special treatment, she emphasized. We want acknowledgement of what happened, accountability for those responsible, and most importantly, concrete changes to prevent this from happening to other young travelers. The twins nodded solemnly. They had come a long way from the excited teenagers who had boarded that flight just a week earlier. They had lost some innocence, perhaps, but had gained something too, a deeper understanding of justice and the courage to stand up for it. As they gathered around Dorothy's computer for the scheduled call, Andre turned to his sister. Ready? He asked quietly. Amara took a deep breath and nodded. Ready, she confirmed. The screen lit up with the faces of the airline representatives, and the next chapter of their journey began, one that would ultimately lead to significant changes not just for one airline but for an industry long overdue for transformation. 3 months had passed since that fateful flight. The Johnson family sat together in their living room, a sense of accomplishment hanging in the air as Andre closed his laptop. That's the final draft of our statement for the press release, he said. What do you think? Michelle leaned over to read it, pride evident in her eyes. It's perfect. Clear, focused on the positive changes, but not glossing over why those changes were necessary. The journey to this moment had been long and at times difficult. The video call with the airline executives had been just the beginning, a tense but ultimately productive conversation that set the stage for everything that followed. The airline's initial response had been typical corporate damage control, expressions of regret, assurances that Ms. Winters's behavior did not reflect company values, and offers of vouchers for future travel. But the Johnson family, with Dr. Wright's steady guidance, had held firm to their original requests: acknowledgement, accountability, and concrete policy changes. "We're not interested in free tickets," David had stated firmly during that first call. "We're interested in making sure no other young travelers experience what our children did." That clarity of purpose had shifted the tone of the conversation. The chief customer officer, a woman named Linda Chen, had finally set aside her prepared talking points and engaged more authentically. "Tell me what you think needs to change," she had asked, directing her question not to the parents but to Andre and Amara themselves. The twins had exchanged surprised glances. Adults rarely asked for their opinions on such serious matters, but they were ready with answers. "Flight attendants should have clear guidelines about when it's appropriate to involve security," Amara had suggested. "It shouldn't happen just because someone doesn't like how a passenger looks. And there should be a way for other crew members to step in when they see something wrong happening," Andre had added. "Ms. Chen tried to help us, but she didn't seem to have the authority to override Ms. Winters." Their thoughtful responses had made an impression. By the end of that first call, the airline had agreed to form a review committee to examine their policies regarding unaccompanied minors and security protocols. More surprisingly, they had invited the Johnson family to participate in the process. "They're probably just trying to keep us quiet by making us feel involved," David had said skeptically after the call. "Maybe," Dr. Wright had acknowledged, "but even if that's their initial motivation, it gives you a seat at the table. That's not an opportunity to waste." Over the following weeks, the airline had followed through on their promises. Ms. Winters had been placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. The review committee had been formed, including representatives from crew training, customer experience, and, importantly, external experts in bias and equity in customer service environments. The Johnsons had participated in 3 virtual meetings with this committee, sharing their experience and offering suggestions for policy improvements. To their surprise, they had been listened to with genuine interest, particularly when they emphasized the need for clear, objective criteria for escalating passenger issues to security. 6 weeks after the incident, the airline had reached out with news. They were developing a comprehensive training program addressing unconscious bias in customer interactions, with special attention to the treatment of young travelers of color. They wanted the twins' input on the program's content. "They're actually taking this seriously," Michelle had said with cautious optimism. "Public pressure helps," Dr. Wright had pointed out. "That social media post about the incident has over 200,000 shares now. Other passengers have come forward with similar stories. The airline knows this isn't going away." Today, 3 months after the incident, the family was preparing for a significant announcement. The airline was unveiling a series of policy changes and training initiatives directly, resulting from the Johnson case as it had come to be known within the company. They had invited the twins to participate in a press conference scheduled for the following week. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Michelle asked her children now. "It's okay to say no. You've already done more than enough." Andre looked at his sister, then back at his parents. "We're sure," he said. "It feels important to see this through." Amara nodded in agreement. "Besides, they're announcing the Youth Advisory Council too. We should be there for that." The Youth Advisory Council had been one of the most unexpected developments of the whole process. During one of the committee meetings, Andre had mentioned how helpful it would have been if the airline had clear information specifically for teenage travelers flying alone, not just the basic unaccompanied minor policies that applied to younger children. Linda Chen had seized on the idea, proposing a council of young people from diverse backgrounds who could provide ongoing input on the airline's policies and communication. The twins had been invited to be founding members. "I still can't quite believe how far this has gone," David said, shaking his head in wonder. When you first texted us from that plane, saying there were some issues with a flight attendant, I never imagined we'd end up here. Me neither, Andre admitted. I thought maybe they'd give Ms. Winters a warning or something at most. The reality had been much more substantial. Ms. Winters had ultimately been let go from the airline after the investigation revealed that the twins' experience wasn't an isolated incident. Other crew members had come forward with accounts of concerning behavior they had witnessed, and passenger complaint records had shown a pattern that should have raised red flags long before. More importantly, the airline had recognized that the problem went beyond one individual. They had committed to systemic changes, revised training for all customer-facing staff, clearer guidelines for security escalation, a new reporting system for crew members to flag concerning interactions, and regular review of complaint data to identify potential patterns of bias. The press release they were now reviewing outlined all these changes, with quotes from airline leadership acknowledging the role of the Johnson family in bringing about this transformation. "Do you think it will really make a difference?" Amara asked, voicing the question that had lingered throughout the process. "Or are they just saying all the right things because people are watching?" "A bit of both, probably," David answered. "Honestly, companies usually act when it's in their interest to do so. Right now, addressing this issue publicly is good for their reputation. But," Michelle added, "that doesn't mean the changes aren't real or valuable. Sometimes the reason for doing the right thing matters less than the fact that the right thing gets done." And, she continued with a small smile, "having you two on that youth advisory council means you can help hold them accountable. You'll be able to see firsthand whether they follow through." The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. David went to answer it and returned with Dr. Wright, who had become a friend and mentor to the family over the past months. "Sorry, I'm late," she said, setting down her bag. "Faculty meetings always run over. How's the statement coming along?" "We just finished it," Andre replied, handing her his laptop. "What do you think?" Dr. Wright read it carefully, nodding with approval. "Excellent work. It strikes just the right balance, acknowledging progress without letting them off the hook for what happened." She handed the laptop back and sat down. "I have some news that might interest you all. 2 other major airlines have reached out to me about developing similar training programs for their staff. They've been watching how this situation has unfolded and decided to be proactive rather than reactive." The twins exchanged excited glances. "Really?" Amara asked. "So this could affect more than just one airline?" "That's often how change happens," Dr. Wright explained. "One organization takes the lead, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes because they're pushed, and others follow, especially when they see it's good for business. Passengers care about how they're treated and how they see others being treated." The conversation shifted to preparations for the upcoming press conference. Dr. Wright had agreed to accompany the family, providing both moral support and her professional perspective if needed. "Keep in mind that there may be some challenging questions," she cautioned. "Some people might suggest you're overreacting or making too much of a single incident. Remember that you have the evidence and the witnesses, you know what happened." The twins nodded solemnly. They had grown accustomed to such dismissals over the past months, particularly in online comments about their story. But they had also received countless messages of support from other young travelers who had faced similar situations but hadn't known how to respond. "We've been practicing," Andre assured her. "Mom's been throwing all kinds of tough questions at us." Michelle smiled, ruefully. "My years in corporate communications finally came in handy for something other than writing boring press releases." The day of the press conference arrived bright and clear. The event was being held at the airline's headquarters, a modern glass building in the downtown business district. As their car pulled up to the entrance, Amara reached for her brother's hand. "Nervous?" she asked. "A little," he admitted.